Buenos dias, good morning, welcome. For about the next hour, from the podium anyway, that's the last Spanish you'll probably hear. I know a couple of different languages, C, PL SQL, and so on, but English is the only one that I can talk with verbally. This morning, I'm here to talk about the best way, sort of best practices. Have you ever noticed how if you've asked 5 different people, what is the best way to do something, you'll probably get at least 5 different answers, if not 6 or 7, because one of them will change their mind and come up with an even better way to do something. But the best way to do something depends on lots of different things. The best way or the best thing is dependent on lots of external influences. Think of a simple question. What is the best month to go swimming in the ocean? Has nothing to do with the database. If I ask that question of someone who lives near me, they're going to answer August. August is the best month to go swimming in the ocean. If you ask someone who lives on the equator, they're going to say every month is the best month. I mean, the weather is constant, it's continuous. And if you ask someone from, say, southern Australia, they're going to say February is the best month, which if I heard the answer February, I would raise an eyebrow, because where I live in February, if you went swimming in the ocean or just went outside in a bathing suit, it would be a really bad idea. So the best answer to that question depends. It depends on lots of things. Here's another more technical example. My manager has a father, and his father was going to do this golf outing. Golf is a very popular sport up in the US. And when you play golf, you play in groups of 4, typically. And so there was going to be 8 people going out to play golf, and they were going to play 7 games of golf, 7 rounds of golf. And what my manager wanted was a really easy way to schedule these 8 people for 7 rounds of golf in a random way, such that we could minimize duplication of how many times we had played with the same people over and over again. And he asked 3 different people this question. He asked me. He asked a person who works for me, a Java programmer. He also asked his brother, who was a statistician, worked with a package called SAS, Statistical Analysis Software. Now, when he asked me, I thought about it and said, obviously, the best way to answer this question is with a SQL query. I'm just going to write a SQL statement where down here in lines 11 through 17, I'm going to generate a set of players, and I'm going to generate 7 of these, because I've gone up here and I've generated 8 records. Here I've generated 7 different rounds of golf. I'm taking the 8 players, the 7 weeks of golf, Cartesian product those together. I get 56 rows. I assign them random numbers. I pivot them by week. And of course, when you run this query, you get this output. And this is the first 4 columns, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is one set of players, and the second is the second set of players. For me, this was the best way. It took me about a minute to write this. Why? Because this is what I do every day, day in, day out. Now, his brother, who's a statistician, works with SAS. Once upon a time, in a previous life, before I came to Oracle, I worked with SAS a lot too. I was known as the SAS master where I used to work at. I could no longer do it in SAS because my skills were very old in it, some 15 years old. I hadn't used it in a long time. But his brother basically did the same thing inside of SAS. Now, the Java programmer, how do you think he would approach it? He'd write Java code. And he assures us that the prototype for this application will be ready in a week or 2, right? But that's just a little Java joke. But the best way for him is to code it in Java. He'll go out and find some Java libraries that do the same thing. Okay? The point is, depending on who you ask, the best way to do something is going to vary widely. It's going to be based on their experiences. And so we many times have to take the best advice, the best way to do something, weigh that against our experiences, our knowledge, and our context. Where in the world are we? That dictates when the best month to swim would be. The advice we get about technology, it too is influenced by where in the world are we, what are we trying to do, and what are our conditions. So I was doing this best practices presentation. I was putting it together for Oracle Open World, and I decided to go out and look for a definition of best practices. And I found this one, and it seemed to cover it very nicely. And when you read the definition, it makes a best practice sound like the best thing ever. A best practice is a consensus of expert opinions based on actual experiences in practice. They're lessons learned. Proven practices associated with a particular usage profile. Baseline configuration rules. Prerequisites to tuning. So far, it sounds all good. Best practices sound like I want a lot of these, because if I have this, I know what the experts would do. I know exactly how to approach this particular problem. But then the person who wrote this goes on to say on the next page, but it's easy with best practices to forget that once something has been branded as best, it may represent certain trade-offs, may involve noteworthy downside potential. It might be a bad thing. It might be a really bad idea. It is also easy to forget the context. And this is an important word. We're going to keep coming back to it. The context, your situation, where in the world you are. It's easy to forget the context for which any given practice was promoted as best, and therefore apply it in some inappropriate context. Think about this one. Junior developer, just hired on, has read books on SQL tuning. According to that junior developer, the best SQL queries will always use an index because they read in a book that the best way to get a row is through an index. Unless you want to get 5 million rows out of a 5 million row table, in which case the index is the worst way. You need to have the best practice along with sufficient context. What are you actually trying to do in order to determine if something is truly the best way? By the way, this was written by a guy named Bob Schneed. I know Bob. He is a Sun Oracle performance engineer. He worked at Sun Microsystems. He would do benchmarking and tuning of Oracle on Sun hardware. He would develop best practices and then publish them. And people would come back to him and want to hit him sometimes because they would say, I followed your best practices and failed miserably. And he would ask questions and he'd go, well, of course, I was trying to do this and you were trying to do something completely different. You followed my advice, but you weren't building the same exact system I was building. You have to look at the context. And so when he would document his best practices in the future, he would always put this disclaimer there. When I was at Oracle Open World, the day before I was to give this keynote presentation, I attended another session.